physically and otherwise. I no longer even feel the physical hunger, and I'm getting further and further the knowledge that's being shared here. I want to take a second, let's put our hands together for all the presenters. They've certainly done a fabulous job of setting out some critical things here to start a conversation. I've taken note from everyone and filling pages, just trying to get the main bits from Dr. Maharaj, who's talking about the fact that our biodiversity is on decline. If you look at the diversity of species, the populations are declining, the risk is increasing, and the intactness is also on decline. And the illustration we see in that story about the pollinators and how we're all interdependent, so that the declining biodiversity affects us and how we are able to live. Aisha was telling us here also that we don't know really as much as we ought to know about our biodiversity, but what we do know tells us that biodiversity matters significantly to us, and our development is dependent on that biodiversity. And with that, we need more information than we currently utilize for our decision making, and therefore our decision making needs to be dynamic. We can't just think that we'll make a decision now based on a limited set of knowledge and let that stand forever. As knowledge increases, we must be willing to revisit those. We must empower decision making by empowering persons, building capacity and so on, and encourage participation. From Dr. Rosales, we learned of a critical project in which university is engaging, looking at the coastal region and its history and agriculture. It caused me to reflect on something I learned as a second-year student in biology when we were given a project to speak about a species, and I chose the harpy eagle. And I learned that the harpy eagle used to live on the coast. And it's not a strange thing because they use the silk cotton tree, which is on the coast. And now they're gone because we modified our coastal forest. So we modified it over the years, and now we're taking a look back at those ecosystems and managing those coastal ecosystems that are so critical to the agriculture that we're dependent on. Dr. Thomas from Eurocrama would have given us some insight into the work there and the fact that repeating that need for biodiversity to support life, and that we, even though there's a doom kind of a picture being projected, we need and we can still act to turn things around. And identify the fact that Guyana has been and continues to be a leader, and how that is demonstrated in our forestry endeavors in sustainable forestry and the emerging sector of sustainable tourism. Dr. Chesney gave us insight into the fact that, I think, let me see if I got this right, that Guyana has about 40 times the global average of biocapacity. Is that correct? It's a critical thing for us to recognize that our agriculture, however, is based on alien species which are not dependent on our ecosystems. So we're transforming our ecosystems to facilitate the agriculture that we are currently engaging in. And therefore, it would be useful for us to be able to consider more native species, more akin to our ecosystems, so that we are able to better manage our ecosystems while we engage in critical agriculture to support our lives and livelihood. I like the term used, synthetic biodiversity. We have a graduate from biology who was finishing up a master's, and when I asked what she was doing for her project, she was doing something in food technology, and she was learning to make synthetic meat. She was building the cellulose scaffolding on which they would then cause the meat cells to grow. Which is very interesting sort of frontline work when we sing development. I like his mention of the need for science diplomats. Mr. Liverpool spoke about the high fish diversity that we have and the fact that gold mining is affecting that, but not only affecting that, but affecting the ecosystems that we have in which the fish dwell and in which they depend. And we see that in mercury impacts and land cover and the impact of the mercury in the food food chain and how it disrupts the food chain in particular. One thing I'll drop as a bit that most Guyanese don't know, that we actually have freshwater sponges not so far away from us. If you live in Bartica, you travel for 10 minutes at low tide, go on one of the little bars that emerges and look on the rocks. You'll see at least about 3 to 5 different species of sponges. If you're from the Esquimalt coast, you go to Lake Stay and get into the water and look on the bottom of the stalks of the muckamucka, you'll see some things that kind of scratch your skin. The community members told me they were going to cut it out at one point, and then I said, no, that's a good indication that you have good, clean water because they're freshwater sponges thriving in that environment, regardless of all the activities there. Then finally, from Curtis from Conservation Internationals, tying in all of these together, pointing out that conservation is not preservation and does not mean that we have to stay in poverty. It's a critical message to take away, that biodiversity conservation is essential to our development, and to ensure it's essential for that development to be sustainable and to be sustained. And the how is critical, and we know already some of the how. We must maintain natural biodiversity, and in doing so, we must understand this interconnectivity that was referred to by other speakers. So I'll give that brief summary, because we've been here listening to all of these different things for quite a while. I know you have some questions, so we're going to go for at least 2 rounds of questions. We have about 45 minutes on the clock that we can accommodate these questions in. We're going to open the floor. We're going to take about 5 questions in the first round. I'm going to ask you to stick your hands up. When you're speaking, please identify yourself. If you'd like to identify an institutional affiliation, that's fine. But also, please keep your intervention very brief. And you know, I don't just hit the glass for the speakers. You have volume control on the mic. But I ask you, please respect the gathering, and let's keep them brief. Pose your question. If you have a question to a specific person on the panel, please identify who it is to be directed to. If it's an open question for the panel to respond to, then certainly you can just leave it open and we'll give the panel a chance to respond. So we'll get the ball rolling. The first 5, just by show of hands, just if your hands if you can go, we'll get one to the back. Can I take one from the front? And you guys will decide which one will go. 3, 4, and 5 here. So we get going. Go.
How was that? Okay. I don't know about the rest of you all, but this presentation has depressed the hell out of me. That's the comment. The question is, and perhaps anybody would care to respond to this. Are you, from what I'm hearing here, are the speakers, every single one of them, telling us that we all have to become amateur or full-time scientists to deal with the problems that we're talking about? I mean, they can be changed, but they have to be changed by people who understand the subject, can attack the subject, can anybody.
Good evening to the panel. I'm impressed by Dr. Thomas, Dr. Caesar, the other person after Dr. Caesar. I want to start with the mercury discussion first. You spoke about mercury, the gold, diamond seekers, and those people. You tend to emphasize that they create mercury by the work they do by gold mining. But I want to draw your attention to the mercury in Georgetown. You go around the cemeteries, you test the waters there, you will find lots of mercury and lead. Mercury and lead creates a lot of mental problems for children, especially those at school age.
After we get to the question, just in a matter of time,
Are you aware that mercury are here in Georgetown more than what is in the material? For Dr. Caesar. You spoke a lot about biodiversity, and we are moving to a genetic stage of changes of our food system. I want to focus on Guyana, how that affects us here in Guyana, for Dr. Thomas. Let's talk about the tourism. I looked at the beaches in Guyana. I've done my research, so I had to move around. In Guyana, the beaches are atrocious. Lots of.
Sorry, I'm going to intervene. I'm going to ask that you very quickly get to the question on this one so that we can go on.
What are you aware that the beaches are atrocious in this country? And if you are, what are you doing about it?
A very good evening to everyone. My name is Timothy Colin Cornelius Rutherford. I'm a PhD student at the University of Guyana and will be taking off my office at the end of the month. Recognition for Vice Chancellor, Angelo Griffith, Chairperson, presenters. I have 3 questions this evening. Dr. Chesney, your presentation elaborated on biodiversity by considering biodiversity as Guyana's future, with a biocapacity, particularly in nature, remaining to support global biodiversity. As regards nature biodiversity, our scientists in the early 1990s have projected that our planet will remove the effects of climate change by 100%. However, only 90% was achieved, allowing 10% to be impacted by metabolic pathway diseases such as Zika virus, chikungunya, and Ebola, in areas of the world where the distribution of the metabolic pathway diseases emphasize the prevalence of the disease. In Africa, these distributed...
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah, please.
Please pose the question.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Not to make another presentation.
Yes, I wanted to draw to Dr. Patrick Chesney the attention of the enormous work that was done by the new agricultural production system that removed 446 of the GT carbon dioxide equivalent for which agroecological emissions are being considered by the International Panel on Climate Change. Having achieved such an enormous task, my question to Dr. Patrick Chesney, which would have, of course, emerged from the discussion on biocapacity and the work of the scientists over several years, how would Guyana utilize the 48 million United States dollars outside of the framework of the Guyana-China agreement? It is recognized that the Guyana-China agreement has some 37 million United States dollars, or with a global total of 38 trillion United States dollars. How would Guyana utilize those monies for improving biodiversity? Thank you very much. Thank you.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Vernon Badesi, Chairman of Guyana Hemp Industries, and I would like to know where the panel stands on hemp. I think hemp is a major solution for Guyana for a third crop. From mining, you can just throw the seeds on the ground, it will reclaim the land. You can even suck out some of that poisonous material you're talking about, the mercury. It doesn't need that much water, so that can help as well. And it's 10 times more valuable than sugarcane and rice. And it only takes about 90 days or 120 days per crop. Guyana can have at least 3 crops per year. So I'd like to know, how come this is not part of your agriculture? And hemp is coming around soon. We're working behind the scene with the President's office and the other parties that's involved in Guyana right now.
Thank you very much, sir. And the final question will take from the gentleman that's here.
Well,
You can take the mic, please. So they can face it.
good evening, everyone. My name is Lachman Dindial. My question is for Dr. Chesney. Well, it relates to this young lady here also. So probably either one. Before I go ahead, I must tell the last speaker that you mentioned 2 valid words: unique and poor. Guyana is unique, yes. However, we are poor financially. And these very same people who told us that we are poor, they are here again to steal our richness. And if we don't stand up,
Thanks for the comments. Any other questions?
Can you get the question, please?
Oh, yes, sure.
Thank you very much.
Chesney, right? Well, based on my research on biodiversity coming to this forum, and looking at the topic, the very root cause of destruction of biodiversity is the capital system around the world. Just brief. Capital system is where you take resources out of the earth crust, turn it into things, byproducts, you sell the things, and you destroy the things, you throw away, and you start all over again. That is how you disrupt the biodiversity, especially bauxite. And
Question, sir.
Oh, yeah. So the question is, how can you or this individual, I heard you spoke about having this organization and having both people come on board to the biodiversity in Guyana future. Is there any organization or group in Guyana who is willing to stand against these system that wants to come and exploit the resource that would disrupt the biodiversity in this country?
2 or 3 quick responses.
Do we all need to become scientists to prevent the doom and gloom? I would hope that my presentation also gave a little positivity, that Guyana has always been ahead in terms of biodiversity conservation. I think globally there's a gloom and doom scenario, but we do need to have also optimism, because we have the capacity to create change. In terms of becoming scientists, I don't think we all have to become scientists, but we also need to develop a consciousness about what is going on around us. And this may be several-fold to answer some of the questions. We need to get involved through activism. Don't sit and accept everything that goes on around what we are doing, what the government is doing, and so on. Educate. Citizens need to educate themselves, and they also need to join up with like-minded organizations, and we need to strengthen civil society. There are organizations, environmental, the young man, there are environmental organizations, even at the University of Guyana. There are societies that deal with the environment. There's Guyana Marine Conservation Society, there's Guyana Society of Ecosystems and Biodiversity and Ecosystems, and there are some other organizations that you can also join. But also aside from that, it's not just the science, but the social aspects, how we're affecting people and so on. So you need to also consider that aspect as well. As linked to the tourism and beaches are atrocious, I'm getting the sense that we're talking here about garbage.
Yes.
So that is the sickness of the coast. And along with this environmental awareness and activism, this is where I think Guyanese need a new consciousness. We need to get our youth involved more in caring about this special place that we live. But there are many more things that we need to do. We need to clean up our act. We have a problem with littering in Guyana, and we really do need to clean up our act. And through, again, I think getting involved in such organizations, but also we as individuals can create change. You don't even have to be in an organization to create change. Through music, through art, through drama, there are many ways that we can do it, but we can't just sit back and say, well, those people are making a mess and do nothing about it. I think we all need to be involved.
I would go at answering the first question slightly differently. In saying we don't need to become scientists in the hardcore sense, but I think we all in our own little realm really do need to take a scientific approach to what we do, in the sense of being objective and open and deliberate in learning and improving what we do.
Mercury and George. Thank you for your question, sir. Even though I focus on Mercury in the freshwater ecosystems in much of our mining communities, we've actually been doing studies in our canals around Georgetown. Only last year, 2017, we've completed a study on varying levels of impacted canals around Georgetown. And what we find interesting is that, as you pointed out, there are high levels of lead, concentrations in these canal systems. What is also prevalent is cadmium, iron, and we found low levels of mercury within those canal systems around Georgetown. So yes, we're doing studies. These are ongoing and these are continuous. It's just a matter of time of having these academic material published and made available to the public. Thank you.
I think 3 questions were directed. I think the one with genetic diversity, I believe that it is well documented that biodiversity allows agriculture to be responsive to markets and to changing human needs. And it's with that I perhaps identify, for example, cassava. When I talked about using native genetic diversity to meet food and agricultural needs of a growing population. The large, and what I would like to refer to as the genetic elasticity of cassava, it's not just available in a large number of distinct genetic material, but the adaptability of it to different environments and to growing conditions allow us to use this particular species to meet growing human needs. And it is the reason why FAO organized the regional conference. And the regional conference was not Latin America and the Caribbean. This time around was Caribbean and Latin America. The emphasis was on meeting the growing food and fiber needs of the Caribbean as against Latin America. So that's important. On the issue of hemp, again, the example of cassava is important because, look, it's an important phytoremediant as well. In the skin of the cassava, particularly the bitter cassava, studies have shown that you do have the accumulation of heavy metals. So the plant has that function. In addition to one that we also know as fat pork, Chrysobalana psychaco, it's also phytoremediant. Heavy metals, we have tested this. There was some important work done some years ago that shows that this particular plant accumulates heavy metals in all parts of the plant, in the fruit, in the stem, in the roots. It's a plant, particularly the fruit should never be eaten by pregnant and lactating women, especially if it's grown in those parts of Guyana where mineral mining is occurring. On the question of $48 million US, here's what I'll do with that money. I'll put together a consortium of the University of Guyana, EOCRAMA, EPA, cooperatives, and the private sector, and set up an international center for biodiversity. I think that's all for me.
I want to give some answers about the first question, if we need only scientists, because I am a scientist. One of the, it is very important that as you listen here from the conservation of biodiversity, we need society to be involved. But then society is not only, needs to manage the science knowledge, but we need people that transfer the knowledge to the society at different levels. So, in this regard, we need the educators, we need the communicators, we need the artists. So, but of course, first you need to understand, or the people that transfer this knowledge, or those that can be interested, needs to understand the science. Otherwise, they will transfer knowledge that is not real knowledge. Okay, And then that is the nine bite all that can be incorporated in economics, in politics, in education, in communication, to be involved in the conservation of biodiversity and the transfer of the science.
Quickly, I was really remiss of me not to mention that when we talk about managing and conserving our natural resources, it's not only about science in the traditional concept of science, but to acknowledge the importance of traditional knowledge. And I think for students here is something that is very important for you to acknowledge. In indigenous knowledge, not only indigenous knowledge, but knowledge of even rural communities on the coast, from the Afro, the Indo, and other communities that have come from other parts of the world. So in totality, it's very important to know that those science and traditional knowledge is really important to work together in terms of sustainable natural resource management in the context of also how Iwokrama works. Thank you.
So I think I'm the one that depressed you. I wanted to say that I'm happy that I depressed you. The reason being is because the fact that you're depressed, and I'm sure that so many others here were depressed by my doom and gloom speech, it was because you identified what was happening if we lose our biodiversity. The fact that you can identify that we are losing our biodiversity and it saddens you is so important. And I think you've answered your question. We don't all need to be scientists. We need our children to understand biodiversity. We need our social workers to understand biodiversity. We need our engineers to understand biodiversity. We need everyone to understand biodiversity, and we need the diversity of people in mind so that they can come up with solutions as we deal with biodiversity. Because it's a problem that affects all of us, and therefore the solution must involve all of us. We need musicians to raise awareness about what's happening. So I'm not happy that you're sad. I hope that I do hope that from everything that we've said, that you move from sadness to conviction that you will do something about biodiversity.
Thank you very much. We have a question from online, and I think given that we're engaging online, we shouldn't just go one way. So I'll put that one on the table, and we'll take 4 from the audience. So 4 persons, you better be quick putting up your hands. The question is, what role will UG play in conservation of biodiversity? I'm kind of summarizing what I saw in the text from David Modest, I think is the name. I think Dr. Maharaj or Mr. Liverpool may want to take that on. So we'll go for 4 persons. I'm going to try to spread geography here. So I'm going to take one only from the front. I've got a young man that's here. For you. So we're going to balance it because female here, 1 more across there, 3. Last person, we're going to go back. Right on to the back, but not a female. So females are going to dominate this round, and let's go quickly.
Michael Morrison, President of the Ecotroll Society, University of Guyana. This question is directed to Dr. Chesney. Besides climate change, can you please outline other environmental problems that affect agrobiodiversity in Guyana? Thank you.
Marisa Taka from the University of Guyana. So this question is to the representative from Iwokrama. So my question basically is, why is it so expensive for students who were pursuing environmental studies to come to this place of Iwokrama so that we'll be able to have experience in the field? Why is it so expensive for us as students?
Good night, sir. Safeda, student of environmental science, environmental studies, UG. I like that question a lot.
Early this year, I visited Trinidad, and the oil refinery actually had a wildlife sanctuary within the same compound. So you saw like this balance of industrialization and nature. And since Guyana is entering this field where we will utilizing the same resource, do you think there's something in the future we can actually balance it to have a wildlife sanctuary in the same compounds as an oil refinery? That would be my question to anyone in the panel. Do you think that is possible?
Hello, good evening. My name is Nikita Blair, and I'm from the Center of Communication Studies. While we were in our first year, we studied a little bit of climate change journalism. And one thing that we noted was that humans have a finite pool of worry, which means that, like, for example, when you're talking about the doom and gloom of biodiversity conservation, we have a limited capacity to tolerate all of this news, while we have our own personal worries to be concerned about while we are here in our environment. So my question to anyone on the panel is, how can we as communication students or journalists work with you to inform the public about all that we have talked about today without being exhausting and depressing, and while still encouraging our people to change themselves and to work with you to better our economy, etc., while still making sure that they are informed?
Fantastic questions. Thank you very much. I'm going to ask the presenters let's pay attention to time and keep our responses as brief as the questions were. Good example again from the young man.
So I'll address the question of the role of the university in conservation of biodiversity. The university plays quite a few roles as it relates to biodiversity. First, there is education. There are our formal courses which we offer, for example, natural resource management, and many of the courses that we also offer in environmental sciences. Two, we do training. We have short training where we look at how students can do research. Well, part of the training that we're doing through the Biodiversity Center is we look at how students can collect data from forested areas, how they can analyze data, and then how they can publish that data. We also deal with biodiversity from a practical point of view, where students go out and do their research. Not just do research as it relates to their final year project, but as it relates to the courses that they're doing the courses that they're doing for their degree programs or their diploma programs. And of course, the university has the Center for the Study of Biological Diversity. The center is the largest repository for the research collection for the entire country. So every time someone goes out and they do research, part of their mandate for doing research is to leave part of their specimens or to repatriate those specimens to Guyana. And we're the ones that hold that information with the databases, and it's used for whether it's students visiting, so there's education, it's used by our students themselves to do their projects, and it's used for mining of information as it relates to conservation.
I just want to finish because I know that she wanted me to finish, that also the university provides at the level of research programs a PhD and MPhil in biodiversity, and that is also in relation with the Center of Biodiversity.
I think I could add, not representing UG, but I think a major part of what University of Guyana provides is partnerships with providing partnerships with organizations like ourselves, Environmental Conservation International, WWF, businesses. It helps provide, the connection, the real life connection, the real life, implementation experience of the aspects that we're studying from the books and the lectures to what's happening actually in the working world. So I think that's one important aspect. On the question of whether it's possible to have a wildlife sanctuary and oil refinery, I hope we don't come to that. We have so much richness of biodiversity here. So we need to manage them where they are. To create an a wildlife sanctuary within an oil refinery, actually what we need to do is to manage what we're doing within the oil sector, manage what we're doing in other sectors to ensure that we don't impact negatively on the biodiversity that we have naturally existing. I think that's important. Also in terms of research, actually the last question that was asked, how people can actually, how communicators, media can actually engage the public, especially when they're worrying about their personal matters. And I think based on the discussions that we've been having here, biodiversity conservation actually is part of our personal issues right now. And we should see that as an important aspect of what we're doing, how we're living day to day, and all the activities that we are involved in that can have increased impact on our biodiversity and how we can reduce that. And I asked the same questions to reporters earlier today, funny enough. And one of the things we need to do more as conservation organizations or scientists in terms of how we can engage, make it more visible, make it more, tangible. And I think that's an important aspect that we can improve on.
Why is it so expensive to go to Iwokrama? Already part of the theory, and I think I addressed one of the major reasons why in my presentation. But just to give you some ideas what is happening this year, the cheapest way to go to Iwokrama is by private public bus. The price went up to $15,000 one way. So you're looking at $30,000 alone just to get to Iwokrama. That's $150 US, right? To hire a vehicle, say 4x4, is between $650 to $700 US. I'm quoting US here because it's more in my mind. We are very aware of these costs, but we have hosted and we continue to host students, not only from abroad, and researchers as well, because researchers also cannot afford the tourism costs. We have different accommodation for students as opposed to tourists, so we can offer cheaper alternatives. But it does start with the transport. Once you're talking, just to get goods into Iwokrama by truck is over $200,000 per truck and more. Those prices have increased due to deterioration of the road as well. But I just want to put in a plug here. Next week, Iwokrama, if the chair would allow me, Iwokrama is hosting an open day on Wednesday next week, the 14th of November. And I would like to invite you and all the students and all persons here to come, and then you could find out also more about the costs and also what we offer for students, because we really try to break it down for the students. Students that come to Iwokrama currently, we've had some programs where we had some special research expeditions where we co-sponsor some students. But due to donations that we get from some other organizations, I'd like to thank Rotary, for example, as one organization. But what I noticed with schools as well, they fundraise, groups usually fundraise. It's also up to students to partly fundraise as well to make these trips. So not only to Iwokrama, there are other places in Guyana that students also need to see. But if you come out next week, we have open from 1 o'clock to 7 o'clock. And we're really catering for students from 1 to 5 and after that. But you're free to come anytime to learn more about how you can cut some of the costs and get to Iwokrama. And I also encourage you, if you're coming to Iwokrama, you need to visit the Rupununi Savannah area as well.
Let me attempt to answer the question posed by the young man who
respect to what other than climate change impact agrobiodiversity. One, lack of public policy. We have a Caribbean agricultural policy, but we do not have a Guyana agricultural policy. Lack of enforcement of laws. We have a Seeds Act 2011. It simply requires a commencement order from the subject minister to create a seed quality and certification agency. That hasn't been done, and that is needed. We observe that GMOs, the GMO front is moving northwards for the very first time north of the Amazon River. It's in Amapá State, it's in Para State, it's in Amazonas State, it is in Roraima State, and it's at Ibini, Guyana. That is a serious threat to our agrobiodiversity. And you will understand that if you're dealing with GM corn is a grass just like sugarcane and rice. So you can understand the implications. Another impact, of course, another source of that impact is the fact that our agriculture remains dependent on non-native species. And there is no concerted effort to promote and support the lesser known species. We have, as I mentioned, cassava, pineapple, and sweet potato are well-developed native crops that are present in very large, in terms of genetic material that's available, in terms of the know-how to commercialize these crops. That's available. But it simply means that while we have a GRDB for rice and a Gaisuko for sugar, we need to put in place institutional mechanisms to support the growth and development of the other commodities as mentioned. Cassava growers in the Rupunoni will know that somebody steps across the border from Brazil, brings in some cassava sticks that matures in 3 months. Give us cassava in 3 months. Do you know what that means? It means that farmers, they are cultivating that cassava in the savannas, close to their homesteads, close to their homes. So they're no longer going to the farms that are far away, because that means picking the family up, leaving school, leaving everything else, and going out to the farm to cut bush, to grow cassava. And that could take anywhere between 3 to 6 months. So it's disruptive, but it's part of the cultural cycle, the seasonality of the cultural organization of those communities. But growing it close to the homes means that we are neglecting the wide genetic diversity at some farm, and we're losing that. I believe there was a team led by Dr. Janet Vulcan and others. They were in the North Rupunoni last year, and they discovered that farmers were no longer cultivating a wide range of those bitter cassava varieties anymore. So that's also a threat. I think the fact that our consumer patterns are changing. We are moving towards a lot of processed foods. I think we're about to hear the sound on the glass. Changing consumer patterns, I think, is an important one. The fact that Guyanese are not socialized to have regular discourse about our biological diversity. You go to Costa Rica and everyone greets you pura vida. Perhaps there's a lesson there that we could learn from. There are others, of course, and I'm happy to engage the young man and anyone else who might be interested to learn of other factors. Thank you.
Thank you very much. In the interest of time, I think we've had responses to all of the questions that were posed. So in the interest of trying to finish by the time they've given me in managing this, and I don't get paid at all. It's an indictment against me if we finish too far beyond the time. So I'm going to start, since the mic is to the end. I want to give each of the panelists 30 seconds, a real 30 seconds, to make any brief closing remarks based on this engagement. So let's try to keep it very brief and bring it along. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'll use my 30 seconds very briefly. I think one of the things I wanted to add a response to is how we can engage, how journalists can be engaged in us more. And I think the key to that is really building the right partnerships and really going out and actually seeking the knowledge. And that's one of the things that we're hoping to do with Conservation International. And one thing I neglected to do in the first round of questioning is to clarify that when I said poor, I actually meant poor by common global economic measures.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to end off by saying we should encourage more of these public talks so that we can have more public dialogue between the scientists and the technical persons as well as the wider public, so that we can have data sharing, information sharing, and promote knowledge sharing among the wider public.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to give a charge to the University of Guyana to put in place programs to train taxonomists. We do not have taxonomists in Guyana. We need taxonomists in Guyana to help us to map, identify, and conserve our genetic diversity that's present largely in the unexplored hinterland of Guyana. Thank you.
Last year I was fortunate to speak at a conference along with Minister Sidney Abbott and Smithsonian in Washington. And the theme of that conference was Earth optimism. So, from my view, let's not get caught up in the doom and gloom scenario, because what it creates, I think, in people is they feel they cannot act. There are many, many good stories around the world, and Guyana has many good stories to share as well. In terms of conservation management, yes, there are also some negatives, but I think we have been ahead of the game compared with many other tropical countries in the world. So we do have a lot in Guyana to be proud of. So let's also focus on that aspect, the positivity. There's also ocean optimism as well. While there's a doom and gloom about oceans, there's also good things happening around the world. And one of the main things is that it just takes one person to create a ripple of change, right? And we have a number of activists in this room, Annette Arjun, I can name. We have a lot of young university graduates in the back there who have been, doing their own little thing. Some now working with us. And also, Leo Prana Day is a new Mariana. I think I forgot to mention that.
Well, here we have the distinguished Vice President of the Society of Biodiversity and Ecosystems from Guyana, and Ms. Vanessa Bell. And I encourage the society, together with the university and the organization, conservation NGOs, to promote every year to have a seminar, a symposium in biodiversity and conservation, and then we can be hosting that with the Center of Biodiversity, that I am sure my colleague will be happy about.
Seconds. I hope that this discussion, Mr. Martins, not necessarily depress you, but depress you to act, right? Depress us all to act. So we love our country, we love our richness, and those are all positives. And I think we should ensure that that urges us to act. Act to maintain what we have, act to protect, conserve, as Curtis speak about, what we have, so that we can live happily here and also our generations to come.
So everyone has said exactly exactly what I was thinking about. So I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for participating. This is the way forward as we think of biodiversity for Guyana and biodiversity being our future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please put your hands together for the panelists. You've done a fantastic job. Use chair's prerogative to add my 15 seconds. Two things that I thought should be said. One, there's need for specialist media training to communicate scientific knowledge. Scientists tend to be socially awkward people that write to themselves. And you need somebody to translate that language so that the ordinary folk can understand it. The regular people like me. But I think sometimes the scientific language gets sort of lost and it needs to be translated. So that's the term, the scientific translators, to bring that knowledge for policy utilization and for awareness building so everyone can engage and benefit from it. And then the final thing, I think we all do need to be scientists actually, in some respect. And we all are, in some respect, scientists. We don't recognize it. To give the vote of thanks, we have a young man from the Faculty of Earth and Environmental Science, Mr. Michael Morrison.
Good evening, everyone. The University of Guyana would like to extend sincere thanks to the sponsors, the 10th Vice Chancellor, Professor Ivan Griffin, speakers who contributed to today's event. We have Ms. Indevi Squires, Mr. Calvin Bernard, Dr. Maharaj, Ms. Aisha Williams, Professor Judith Rosales, Dr. Raquel Thomas Caesar, Dr. Patrick Chesney. We also have Mr. Curtis Bernard. Thank you very much. Special thanks to our other sponsors, including WWF, Food and Agriculture Organization. We have Conservation International. We also would like to thank the Learning Resource Center Department, eGov, Ms. Paulette Paul, PR, and staff of the Public Relations Department, Mr. Neil Sukal, and staff of Impressions Inc., and Ms. Joanne Ramadan, and staff of Texas Hotel. We are also grateful for the work of the members of the university community who serve as ushers, and to the civil society participants who graced us with your presence, and also to you, our online audience. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you all.